So today is lecture number 7 of this introduction to physical metallurgy, and these are the two main basic content of today's lecture. That is classification of materials on the basis of atomic arrangement in them, and second one is metallography. Metallography, sample preparation otherwise. So a lot of things we have already discussed in the earlier lecture, and if you want to recall this one, then this is a very beautiful picture showing structure and property correlation or structure property relationship basically. Here the property basically we are concerned with the transmittance property, light transmittance property, and the structure we are considering here is single grain material, polygrain material, and polygrain material with some porosity or voids, right? So this is the sample is fixed. This is a disc of alumina. This is another disc of alumina. This is another disc of alumina, if you remember. But this disc of alumina is completely transparent. We can able to see the letters. Here, this is somewhat translucent. We can able to see something is there, but not exactly what is the letters. We can able to see. But this one is completely opaque. The material is Al2O3 alumina, but property is different. Optical property is different because the processing is actually different one, right? So if you remember, we have 4 important components of material science and engineering. That is processing, structure, property, and performance, right? These are the 4 important components. So by changing the processing route, we can change the structure. And just by changing the structure, we can change the property of the material. And if the property will get changed, then performance will also get changed, right? And the justification, if you remember why this is happening, you understand. This is a single crystal. That means only single grain is there. The light can easily pass through it and this into our eyes. This is a polycrystalline alumina. Due to presence of many grains, lot of grain boundaries are also present, and the light is getting scattered by this grain boundary, so that much of the light is not coming into our eyes, right? That's why it is translucent. Few light is coming, but here all the light, basically you can consider all the light is getting scattered away from our eyes because of presence of, this is also polycrystalline. That means lot of grains are there, lot of grain boundaries are there, so light will scatter by the grain boundaries, and porosity and voids are there, so further light will get scattered by this porosity and voids. That's why it is completely opaque. Fine. The material is but same. And this is a image, very beautiful image showing complete material science. You can see first part is always designing. We design a material always. Then we do processing. Then the microstructure will get some microstructure, and then property is there. Then performance is there. Then again it is recycled. Again we design the material. So this is a very beautiful cycle we can able to see here. Right? So microstructure will affected by the processing. Property will be affected by the microstructure. The performance will be affected by the property. And recycling means again we recycle it, so that we can again design the material. Now, classification of materials. So if you remember, in the broad classification of materials, those are metals, alloys, one part, and the part is the polymers, and the part is the ceramics, right? Another way, and the kind of material is a composite, which is a mixture of all these things, a mixture of any of the 2 materials. But we can classify the materials further into 2 categories, that is crystalline materials and non-crystalline materials. Non-crystalline materials are also called amorphous materials. Fine. And there is another way of classification, that is ductile material and brittle materials. And this ductile materials and brittle material is on the basis of its behavior, basically mechanical property, whether the material is ductile or whether it is behaving as a brittle way. But this is very important classification, and on this basis of classification, further we'll have a discussion in the next lectures. most of the material we are using in the day-to-day life, basically the metals and alloys, they comes under this kind of material, crystalline materials. And amorphous materials or non-crystalline materials are the glasses, basically. The glasses which we are using. Those are basically amorphous. Now, this is a very beautiful image which will show you a clear distinction between crystalline material and amorphous material. And this kind of classification, crystalline material classification and non-crystalline material classification is on the basis of how the atoms are arranged in that particular material. So you can able to see this is an image of single crystal. This is an image of polycrystalline material or polygrain material, and this is an image of amorphous material. Fine. So you can see what is the difference among them. The first one, it is a single crystal, means it is having a single grain. Entire material is made up of single grain, right? If it is a single grain, there will be no grain boundaries because the entire material is made up of single grain or single crystal. There will be no grain boundaries, right? And you can able to see the atomic arrangement here. The atomic arrangement in single crystal is completely ordered. You can able to see it is in a straight line. Atomic arrangement are in straight line. You can move in this direction from top to bottom or bottom to top, or you can move in horizontal direction. In this direction, you can able to see the atoms are arranged in a ordered fashion and in a periodic fashion also, right? So how you can define whether a material is crystalline or not? You can simply say if the atoms are arranged in a periodic fashion in 3 dimension, as well as the atoms are in an ordered fashion, then that material is a crystalline material. Right? And single crystal means only a single grain will be present. The entire material, bulk material, is made up of a single grain. Right? Now, what is polycrystalline material or polygrain materials? You can able to see the difference between them. It is also crystalline, right? Just I want to show you this part only. Suppose this area. You can see in this area, the atoms are completely ordered and also completely periodic. If you go to another, this part, consider this one. Here also atoms are completely periodic and ordered. You consider this area now, this specific area. Here also atoms are completely periodic and ordered one, right? But what is the difference here? You can see the difference between these two is some boundaries are present. These are nothing but the grain boundaries. These boundaries are nothing but the grain boundaries. Grain boundary is nothing but it is an interface you can able to call. This is an interface separating two grains. So what is the difference between this grain and this grain? The difference between this grain and this grain is what? Difference in orientations, right? This grain orientation is different from this grain orientation. This grain orientation is different from this grain orientations. This grain orientation is different from this grain orientations. So orientation of what? You can able to see orientation of atoms. In this grain, particular grains, for example, the orientation of atoms are like this in a vertical way. But here, the orientation of grains are like this, right? So due to difference in orientation between two grains, there will be an interface. That interface is called grain boundary. Fine. So you can understand why poly means many, crystals means many number of crystals. Polygrain means poly means many, grain means many number of grains. If many number of grains will be present in a material, single material, then obviously there will be a grain boundary, right? Because each grain have a particular orientation. Why they have particular orientation? Because atoms are arranged in a particular orientation, right? So where they meet, that become the grain boundary. I think you people have understood up to this.
Yes, sir.
Now you can able to see what is an amorphous material or non-crystalline materials. You can able to see that here the atoms are neither periodic or they are not ordered, or you can able to see they are disordered arrangement of atoms is present over here. So if the atoms in a material are completely disordered or that they are not periodic arrangement, then it is a amorphous material or non-crystalline materials. Fine. And they do not have any grain boundaries also, right? Obviously. And another interesting point you have to remember is, you can also say that in a crystalline material, whether it is a polycrystalline materials or a single crystal material, they have long range atomic arrangement will be present, right? But in case of amorphous material or non-crystalline material, that is a short range order arrangement will be there. You can able to see the atomic arrangement can be ordered in this material, but that is up to a short distance. Suppose I am considering this part, you can able to see there is some ordered arrangement is present, but the order arrangement is getting lost over here. The arrangement have changed, right? Suppose I am considering this one, for example. Here the arrangement is ordered. Here the arrangement is ordered, but the moment you are moving up to this distance, there is some randomness is present over here, right? So that's why in case of amorphous material or non-crystalline materials, the arrangement can be ordered, but it will be up to a short distance. That's why you can able to say short range order arrangement will be present in amorphous material. But in case of crystalline materials, right, they have long range order arrangement of atoms will be here. Right? So this is another difference. I think this part is clear.
Yes, sir.
So all the metallic materials here which we are concerned with, they are basically crystalline materials, metallic materials or alloys. So now this is a image showing you which kind of material this is. This image is showing you which kind of material. Compare the image with this one, all these three. Which kind of material is this? This is a microstructure, huh?
It's a crystalline structure.
This is a crystalline material, but which kind of crystalline material? Single crystal or polycrystal?
Polycrystalline.
Very good. This is a polycrystalline materials. And this is also a polycrystalline materials. But what is the difference between this polycrystalline material and this polycrystalline material? Can you people figure it out? You can able to see this is 20 micrometer is written, and this is also 20 micrometer. But that means the magnification is same. Magnification of the material is same. This material and this material is also same material. That is titanium. This is also a microstructure of titanium. This is also a microstructure of titanium. This is also polycrystalline. This is also polycrystalline. How polycrystalline? You can understand. Lot of grain boundaries are present. Lot of grains are present. Right? Here also lot of grain boundaries and grains are present. But what is the difference? Can anybody figure it out?
The second one is
Boundary
more
wall.
calculated.
The second one is
More grains, number
very
of.
good.
more
The second
granules.
one is showing more number of grains. That means more number of grain boundaries is there. Or you can able to say here the size of the grain is very, very fine, or very, very small, right? Like the size will be like 300 nanometer size grains will be there. Here it is up to some micrometers. Material is same, titanium. Both are polycrystalline, but the grain size is bigger here. That is coarser grain. Micrometer size grain is present. Here some 300 nanometer size grain is present. Very small size grain is present. Right? You have to remember, if the grain size will be reduced, the number of grain boundary will increase. You have to remember this important line. If the size of the grain will be reduced in a material, the number of grain boundaries will be increased. Fine. And this is again some sketch showing polished surface, showing grain and grain boundaries. You can able to see. In real situation, grain boundaries are not flat always. Sometimes flat, but they are basically curved one. You can able to see grain boundaries and grain. Again, this is a coarser grain material. This is a fine grain material. So you can able to distinguish them. Fine grain materials have no more number of grain boundaries. Coarser grain materials have less number of grain boundaries. Right? Material maybe remains same. Right? And size of the grain is bigger in coarser grain material. In fine grain material, the size of the grain is smaller. Now, this is a very interesting part. This particular slide will cover your lab as well as your theory part. So this is a slide showing sample preparation steps for metallography. So what is metallography? Metallography means scientific study of microstructures in metals and alloys. Scientific study of microstructure in metals and alloys means we want to study what are the different phases in the metals and alloys, what are the different what is the grain size, what is the grain boundaries, what are the different inclusions present, if porosity is present or not. So these are the microstructures, if you remember, right? And sample preparation means, as I told earlier, if somebody will provide you a metallic sample or alloy sample, you cannot able to see the microstructure directly, right? You need a microscope and you need to prepare the sample. You need to prepare a very mirror finished surface first. Here I have written to get mirror finished surface without any scratch. The first thing is to prepare a mirror finished surface out of that sample. Then only you can able to see the microstructures. So first step is what? Sectioning or cutting. What is sectioning and cutting? The sample size may be very big, right? So we cannot put that big sample under a microscope. We need to cut it. We want a very small size sample. A small size sample can reveal a lot of things. So that is called sectioning and cutting. And it may be happen like, suppose you have a very big sample, but your interested area is in a limited area. So what you need to do, you need to cut it and you need to do sectioning of it so that you get that particular reason for microstructural study. So first step is sectioning and cutting. The function you understand, to get a very small size sample. Second one is, or to get a particular reason which you are interested in. The next step is what? Mounting. This mounting means sometimes what happen, the sample size may be very small so that you cannot handle it easily. You cannot do further processing on it. Or it may be like that the sample surface may not be flat completely. The two opposite shape of the opposite side of the sample may not be flat. So you need to produce a flat surface first, anyhow, right? The two opposite surface should be flat, and there should not be any deviation from the flatness. Sample may be flat, but it should not have any angle, right? So mounting is essential. So mounting may be hot mounting or cold mounting. Mounting means we use some kind of epoxies so that we can increase the size of the sample, so that we can hold it properly, and we can make the surface flat further. So it is optional. It is not always required. If the sample size is somewhat bigger and you can easily hold it, then you can skip this step, mounting step. And another point I have told you, if the sample size is flat in both opposite sides, you do not require any kind of mounting again. So mounting is optional. The next step is belt grinding. So belt grinding, this is also optional. It is not always required. Belt grinding means there will be a motor and a belt which will be rotating. You can remove the epoxies present on the sample after mounting, or you can do what? You can remove the oxide layer present on the samples, and it will be a very fast step. You can easily do that within a limited period of time. You can make the sample flat also by doing belt grinding. So this is also optional. But next step 4 is what? Coarse polishing. What is coarse polishing? Or this is sometimes called coarse grinding. We have to use some silicon carbide abrasive paper to make the surface flat, and so that we can reach to the mirror finish surface at the end. And this coarse polishing should need to do in a sequence. We have lot of silicon carbide papers, and each silicon carbide paper have different size of silicon carbide particles, right? Bigger size particles to smaller size particles. So we'll start doing polishing, coarse polishing, from the bigger size particles to the smaller size particle in a sequence, right? So that we can able to reach towards the mirror finish surface. Fine. The next step is the step 5. Here it is fine polishing. Fine polishing is basically done using some cloth, like velvet cloth or very fine cloth papers. Instead of silicon carbide abrasive paper, we are using cloth here. And we have to use some diamond paste or alumina paste. This diamond and alumina paste will act as a abrasive materials, right? They have a particular size. Diamond paste will be have a particular size of particles. Alumina paste will be have a particular size of particles, right? So you can do first diamond polishing, then you can go for alumina polishing. It depends upon the size of the particle. If the size of the diamond particle is bigger, then you have to do first diamond polishing by using cloth paper. Then you can go for alumina polishing if the particle size of alumina is finer, right? But if just it is opposite, suppose alumina particle is bigger, diamond particle is smaller, so you can go for first alumina polishing, then you can go for diamond polishing, right? Always you have to remember, we are going in a particular sequence. We are going in a sequence where the particle size is smaller and smaller, so that we can able to get a mirror finish surface at the end. There will be no scratch. Then the next step is what? The next step is etching step. Etching is a process where we use some acids or alkalis in combination with some alcohol. Fine. So after getting a mirror finish surface, the etching is done. This acids and alkali will attack the mirror finish surface to generate a contrast. Right? After getting a mirror finish surface, we cannot able to see any microstructure. We cannot able to see any grains, grain boundaries, any inclusions, or sometimes any phases we cannot able to see. We need to produce a contrast first. This contrast can be produced by doing etching. So to do etching, we need acids and alcohol combinations, or we need alkali and alcohol combination, or something like that. Or we can do mixture of acids and alcohol. Fine. Then final step is what? We have to wash it with alcohol and we have to dry it with hot air blast. Now the sample is ready so that we can reveal the microstructure. So these are some images. This is a cutting machine. You can able to see this is a cutting machine. This is called abrasive cutter. There is a wheel which will cut the sample into small pieces. Fine. And this image is showing you. This is suppose this is a sample you will get. So this sample is enough. You can mount it. You cannot mount it. So as I told, this is a mounted sample. You can able to see. This is the epoxy part, and this part is the metallic sample. Further, you can break it later after doing polishing or after doing metallography analysis. You can break it to measure the hardness value. You can do that. And these are the emery papers. These are the silicon carbide papers. Lot of papers are there, and each paper having a particular size of silicon carbide particles, coarser to finer. Fine. And these are the velvet papers or the cloth polishing papers to do fine polishing, to get the mirror finish surface. You can use alumina paste or you can use diamond paste, depending upon your requirement, depending upon your size. And these are the references. Now, etching step is very important. It is also called chemical etching of the polished metallic sample to reveal the microstructure. So now, there are certain microstructures like non-metallic inclusions, cracks, porosity or voids. These do not require any kind of etching. You can able to see without etching the sample. But if you want to reveal some grains, grain boundaries, some particular phases, then etching is compulsory. We have to go for etching. So what I have written, now since the polished surface reflects the light equally, then there will be no contrast, right? So after getting a mirror finish surface, the light will be reflected equally from every surface. So what will happen? You cannot able to reveal any microstructures, right? Because you need a contrast. So contrast can be obtained by doing etching only. So contrast is obtained when different regions will be etched at different rate. This is very important. You have to remember. So how contrast is generated by etching? The answer is very simple. When we use any acids or alkali, these acids and alkali attack the sample, and different region will be attacked at different rate. That means some region will be attacked at a fast rate, some region will be attacked at a different rate, slow rate, for example. For example, the grain boundaries and grain. So grain boundaries will be attacked at a faster rate, but grain will be attacked at a slow rate. So due to difference in attack, the contrast may be generated. So what are the main reasons? Here I have mentioned. Difference in chemical attack, which basically depends upon grain orientations. Different grain have different orientations, right? So different orientation leads to different energy of the grain also sometimes. Then energy content of that reason. Some reasons are of higher energy, some reasons are of lower energy. And difference in chemical compositions. Different phase have different chemical compositions also sometimes, right? So due to these three reasons, different in grain orientations, different in energy of the different reason, and different in chemical compositions, the attack will be different, right? The attack by the acids and alkali will be different, right? So that leads to production of the contrast, right? For example, grain boundary attack at faster rate than grain inside. Why? Because grain boundary are of higher energy reasons. If something is having higher energy reasons, they will get attacked more or at a faster rate. But grain have low energy reasons, so it will attack at a slow rate. Variation in chemical composition of phase, attack rate is different. Different phase have different chemical compositions, so attack will be different. Fine. So consequence of different attack leads to formation of different depth on the surface and angles, and consequence of this leads to different amount of reflected light, and surface appears light and dark, and crystalline microstructure get revealed. So what exactly happened? Suppose if you consider a pure metal, suppose pure copper is there, you have a polycrystalline copper, right? So that means it has a single phase. There is no different phase. So no different phase means no different in chemical composition. Only copper is present, right, in each grain, right, and in each grain boundaries. But what happens the moment you are using an acid for etching? What will happen? The grain boundary will be attacked at a faster rate, but the inside grain will be not attacked at a faster rate. Why? Because the grain boundary is of higher energy reason. So difference in energy, the rate of attack is different now, right? So what happens? The atoms present on the grain boundary will get dissolved, right? So if the grain atoms along the grain boundary will get dissolved, so what will happen? There will be some groups, there will be some voids will be there, kind of thing, in microscopic, in atomic level, right? So there will be a difference in depth. So depth of the grain boundary will be less, will be more, but depth of the grain will be less. So due to difference in depth, what will happen? The light falling on it will get scattered along the grain boundaries, but on the grain, it will not get scattered. So much of the light which falls on the grain will come into your eyes, but the light which falls on a bigger depth area, that is grain boundary, will get scattered away. It will not reach into your eyes. So in this way, there will be a contrast. So grain boundary will visible as a darker region, but the inside grain will visible as a lighter region, a brighter region. So that brings a contrast. You can able to see a grain and grain boundary, right? So I think the concept is clear, or you have any doubt right here? Now etchants already I have told you, acids and alcohol, or mixture of acids and alcohol, or alkali plus water plus alcohol. What is the etching time? Etching time is very important. It depends upon the concentration of the etchant and the chemical composition of the sample. It is from several seconds to several minutes. You can do etching for some seconds. You can do etching for some minutes also. Basically, we do etching for several seconds, not minutes, basically. Nital is one of the example. Nital is one of the example, which is a etchant used for etching of the mild steel or steel sample, basically, to reveal grain boundaries, grains, any phases present in it, right? Up to this, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, fine. Now we'll discuss about the grain boundary and its characteristics. Since we are more interested to look at the grain boundaries, can you people tell me why we try to look at grain boundaries. Any idea up to this? I have told a lot of things about grain size and all. So, any interesting fact if you can able to see the grain boundary, what things you can determine from that? Suppose I will give you an unknown sample of steel. Can you able to suppose I will give you two different piece of steel, but having same chemical composition? How can you figure it out that which sample will be harder and stronger, and which sample will be ductile one? What do you need to do? Obviously, you need to do sample preparation first to reveal the microstructure. Then only you can able to say which one is ductile, which one is stronger and harder. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. After sample preparation, you do etching and finally you look at the microstructure. So how you can able to say which one is ductile one and which one is harder and stronger? Just by looking at the grain boundaries or not? Can you justify further? Just by looking at the grain boundaries, how we can able to, or just by looking at the grain, how we can able to say which one is ductile and which one is harder and stronger?
Sir, if
In these slides,
By knowing
in
the
these slides,
size
what I
of
have told you in these slides.
sir, where there is more number of grain boundaries, the sample will be
Yes.
stronger
Very good. Very good.
because
Excellent.
it will
Hmm.
yeah, it, because it will be fracture toughness. I think so. I've forgotten.
It has more fracture toughness.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Very good. So simply, we were interested in grain boundaries because if you can able to see grain boundaries, you can able to see the size of the grain. More number of grain boundaries means size of the grain is very small. If less number of grain boundaries means size of the grain is bigger. If there is a bigger size grain, it is ductile one. Right. In the earlier class also I have told you many times. But if the grain size is finer, the strength will be more, the hardness will be more. But additional things you will get, the toughness is also more here. The composition may same, right? But their processing route has been changed. That's why one is having coarser grain, one is having finer grain. So finer grain steel will be having more strength, more hardness, more toughness. But the coarser grain steel will be having less hardness, less toughness, but more ductility. You understood my point now?
Yes,
or
sir.
no?
Yes, sir.
So now that means finally I am correlating or I am relating the microstructures with the property of the material, right? So metallography will help you in this process. You do not have to measure anything. Just by looking at the microstructural images, you can able to say, yeah, this will be having more ductility. This sample will be having more strength. Or this sample will be having more fracture toughness. This sample will be having less fracture toughness. You understood my point. Just by looking at the microstructure, you can able to say these things. Not qualitatively, but quantitatively, you can able to say. Now, grain boundary and its characteristics. So already I have told you grain boundary is the interface between two adjacent grains, which is formed due to joining of two differently oriented crystal grains. Then atomic arrangement at grain boundary is irregular or not ordered. You have to remember this. This is a very important point. Along the grain boundaries, some atoms will be there, but that is not ordered arrangement always. So grain boundary is a defect. That's why always you have to remember grain boundary is a defect. Why? The atomic arrangement is not ordered in that case. And low atomic density at grain boundary, you can understand, because the atomic arrangement is not ordered, so it is having a lower density, right? And grain boundary is basically formed during solidification. When liquid will become solid, the grain boundary will form, and it may also form during phase transformation. One phase to another phase, when it will change, the grain boundary formation will be there. And during mechanical working, during mechanical working, if temperature is available, grain boundary may also form. This is not the right time to discuss much of the things. You should just remember this one right now. And grain boundaries are basically curved in real, but it reduces the internal energy, so they have a tendency to become flat. So grain boundary may be flat, may be curved. Basically, grain boundaries are curved, but sometimes they become flat when they want to reduce the internal energy, right? Energy of the grain boundary is directly related to the angle of misorientation. So if the misorientation will be more between the two adjacent grain, so grain boundary energy will be more, but there is certain limitations, right, to it. Then grain boundary allows impurity atom to stay. This is also very interesting. Sometimes what happens, impurity elements or alloying elements want to stay in the grain boundary region, not inside the grain. Sometimes that is called grain boundary segregations, right? So there is a problem with this. This is one of the reasons why grain boundary are sometimes brittle. If impurity element will get segregate or get deposited along the grain boundaries, the property will be different in the inside grain part and along the grain boundaries. So grain boundaries become brittle sometimes due to this segregation concept. Fine. And grain boundaries are fast diffusion path. So this is not the right time to discuss, but this is very interesting. We'll discuss further. Fast diffusion path means atomic diffusion will be faster along the grain boundaries as compared to grain, right? Then grain boundary helps in superplastic deformation. This is very interesting. Allow grain to slide along the grain boundaries. So one grain may slide past another grain along the grain boundaries, right? This is very interesting. Again, we'll discuss that further. Then grain boundaries are source and sink for defects like dislocation and vacancy. Vacancy and dislocations we'll discuss in coming lectures. Those are very interesting part in physical metallurgy. So dislocation and vacancy are the source as well as sink for that means grain boundary act as a source and sink for this vacancy and dislocations. Then grain boundary corrosion is one of the concern in crystalline material. Sometimes what happens, corrosion is a degradation of material part. So grain boundary corrosion is very important. Material sometimes degrade along the grain boundaries. So this is why amorphous alloys are more resistant to corrosion, because as I told, amorphous alloys do not have grain boundary. So obviously resistance to corrosion will be more in case of amorphous material. But in case of polycrystalline materials, they have grain boundaries and they have more number of grain boundaries. So if grain boundary will corrode, the material will fail. Then grain boundary production means refining of grain. If you generate more number of grain boundary, so grain refinement will be more, or size of the grain will be reduced to a large extent. Fine. Then concept of grain boundary engineering. So this is a new area of research people are doing nowadays. Grain boundary engineering. What is that? By increasing the fraction of special low angle grain boundary, a growing stress corrosion crack cannot easily cross it. So this concept is very beneficial, right? So just by increasing the number of small angle grain boundary, there's special kind of small angle grain boundary. If you increase them, so this stress corrosion cracking will not happen easily. There is a process called stress corrosion cracking, where we have stresses acting on the material and we have a corrosive environment due to which material fails basically. So if we have lot of small special low angle grain boundary, then this crack cannot propagate easily. So the material will not get fail easily, right? That is called grain boundary engineering. Now, finally, there is another kind of classification of materials that is called ductile material and brittle materials. Ductile materials means they are ductile. That means if you pull the material or if you apply heavy load on the material, they will deform plastically to a large extent, or they will get elongated, they will get stretched without any fracture, right? But brittle material is what? If you apply load on the material, if you pull the material, it will not elongate much, or it will not get stretched much, right? But it will break into pieces. So that is brittle material, right? So ductile materials have high ductility, brittle materials have very, very low ductility or negligible ductility. So metallic materials are ductile in nature basically, but ceramics materials are basically brittle, right? And how to know a material is ductile or not? If during tensile test material undergo gross plastic deformation. Gross plastic deformation means sufficient plastic deformation. Sufficient plastic deformation means they will elongate to a large extent. They will stretch to a large extent. Their shape will change to a large extent without any crack or fracture, right? So before rupture or fracture, this is called ductile one. But if you do a tensile test and the material will fracture easily without any gross plastic deformation, it is a brittle material. So there is a particular kind of test we do that is called tensile test. So this is not the right time to discuss that. So in tensile test, we basically apply a tensile load on the material, right? Tensile load, you can understand in a simple way. We are pulling it in two ends. Or in other words, fracture occurs after yielding or plastic deformation. And if fracture occurs quickly without plastic deformations or without yielding, then that material is called brittle material. You have to remember this two statement. What happens to polymer during tensile test? Basically, polymer elongates to a large extent. That is a very useful property of polymers. You can stretch it to a large extent. Depending upon load, it will stretch and rotation of molecular bonds will take place. This is also very interesting. So when you pull a polymer, it will get stretched and rotation of molecular bonds will take place. So that's why it can be elongated to a large extent also. So ductility in steel decreases with carbon weight percentage. You have to remember this is an interesting point. If a steel is ductile, but the moment you add more carbon, it will move towards brittleness property or ductility will reduce. These are the images showing the fracture surface of the ductile material and brittle material. So this is a brittle material, this is a ductile material. Can you people figure it out what is the fracture surface looks like? You can see the fracture surface in the brittle material is somewhat shiny and somewhat like sharp. But here the ductile material fracture surface is fibrous one. Some rough surface is there and they are not shiny like brittle fracture surface, right? Similarly, you can see this image. You can able to see this is a fracture surface of brittle material and this is a fracture surface of ductile material. You can able to see this is shiny surface. This is somewhat some rough surface or fibrous surface is present here and here. And this is somewhat having some facets of flat surface, but this is having some fibrous region. Fine. You can able to see, distinguish this one. Can you people tell me which one is a ductile fracture surface, which one is a brittle fracture surface here? Compare this one with this two. This one is showing some fibrous region.
Yes, sir. It's
some rough region, some fibrous region, and this is not like a plain region is there. So this is a ductile fracture surface. This material are ductile one, but this material is a brittle material because you can see this is shiny. They have less fibrous region. They are basically showing some facets. Very plain surface is present, right? So this is a brittle fracture. And these are the, when we do tensile test, we can able to see, we can able to get this kind of surface. We can able to get this kind of surface. We can able to get this kind of surface. So this is a brittle fracture surface. This is a ductile fracture surface. But this one is highly ductile. When we pull the material from both ends, the material will get separate by forming a point. You can able to see a sharp point is present in both ends. So that means this is highly ductile. For example, you take a gold, you pull it from both ends. Finally, gold will get separate at middle by forming a sharp tip like this. That means gold is highly ductile. And this is simply ductile. you can have some fibrous region here, like this, like this, like this fibrous. But this and brittle fracture is completely flat, shiny. This is like this, and this is like this. Fine. And from a stress versus strain curve, because you have to do tensile test. So when we do tensile test, we can draw a curve, that is stress curve in y-axis and strain curve in x-axis, right? And by drawing a curve for different material, ductile material and brittle material, you can able to say this is a ductile material, this is a brittle material. You can see for a ductile material, the curve is like this. It is showing large elongation or large strain or large ductility, right? From here to here. But brittle material, you can see the region of brittle material. This is from here to here. So ductility is very less. This axis is showing you the ductility, right? So this material is getting fractured at this point. There is no gross plastic deformation is happening in this material. But here there is a lot more plastic deformation is happening, right? Up to this much. So ductility is from here to here for this material. And for this material, ductility is from here to here, very less ductile. So it is a brittle material, right? So this kind of curve also shows you the material is brittle or this material is ductile, right? So I will end the topic here. If you have any questions, you can ask me. You have any questions here?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, fine. You can leave otherwise.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.